experienced vehicle. So come on out and let us send you to Las Vegas. That's Town Center Chevrolet's across from the Guilford Shopping Center in sunny Surrey.
Company's here.
Mostly cloudy, lows -2 and snow and freezing.
It's a little chilly in here tonight. Wanna snuggle in front of the fire?
I was retiring 6 years ago.
Firehearth gas logs give you the charm and warmth of a real fire instantly with no fuss. A beautiful dancing fire for just pennies an hour. For your gas logs, visit our showroom at 2210 Douglas Road, just off the Lougheed in Burnaby.
May I?
We're coming through for you.
Good morning. The biggest potential tragedy in the world today is the prospect of mass slaughter on the Indian subcontinent after yesterday's disastrous actions in the assassination of Indira Gandhi. Not going to talk about India today, but I've got a man here from the South Africa Foundation, John H. Chettle. And as we are reliably informed, South Africa is on the verge, as it's been for a number of years, of civil war waiting to blow, as witnessed the actions of the South African government recently in sending thousands of troops in to kind of curb potential guerrilla activity. That's item number one this morning. Item number two is the appearance on a shining white horse of the Lone Ranger of British Columbia politics, bearded Graham Lea. Nose maybe out of joint because he didn't get the leadership of his own party, now appears to be attempting to start a kind of weak thrust towards a middle-of-the-road party in British Columbia. That's Graham Lea. After that, we're going to have a bit of a free-for-all. I'm going to deal with this question of how come a lawyer-up Nelson, his name was for a time forbidden to be published after he'd faced serious sex charges. That and a few other. Oh, the Musqueam. Good news for the Musqueam Indian Band this morning. $10 million. Because the Indian Affairs people kind of diddled them. It wasn't fraud, but kind of diddled them on the lease with the lush, extravagant, upper-class Shaughnessy Golf Club. Golfers at Shaughnessy don't need to worry too much about it. We'll get into that later. But first, the man from South Africa. After the break. We've got to look at John H. Chettle of the South Africa Foundation as an apologist for the white regime in South Africa. It's an admitted fact that apartheid is still there, no matter how they polish it up at the edges. And it's a known fact that the troops have been used in large numbers in places like Sharpeville and Company on a crackdown against potential guerrilla warfare. Be straight up blunt with me. South Africa is a country waiting to explode because of the basic bitter apartheid which exists in that country to this very day. True or false?
False.
How false?
Well, I think one of the things that I really am most sorry about is that Canadians are not getting any kind of indication of what changes are taking place in the country. You know, one of the problems is that we are having the worst drought in recorded history. The whole of Africa is having it. So you get this mass of people coming in from the countryside. There's no jobs for them because we're going through a recession. And of course there's this kind of dissatisfaction. Of course there is still resentment about apartheid. But my God, there are all sorts of things that are being done that are just not getting reported in the press here.
Well, what is getting reported is the fact that the troops were moved into these villages, that Tutu has been awarded, Bishop Tutu has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and Tutu states very bluntly that South Africa is a nation riven by apartheid, and he is a man of considerable world prominence, and you really haven't done anything to stop apartheid. You just kind of nibbled away at the edges and allowed a little bit of trades training here and there. Is that not correct?
No, it's not correct.
Well, what about the housing?
Let me take some specific examples. We now have a constitution which gives representation, still not yet to blacks, but to coloureds and Indians. For the first time in 300 years, there are coloureds and Indians in the South African cabinet. For the last 18 months, the South African cabinet has been meeting with top black leaders, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, to discuss the role that blacks will play in the Constitution. And you see a mass of other reforms. For example, black trade unions. 5 years ago, black unions could exist, but they weren't recognized. Now you have people able to belong to any kind of union that they like, whether it be black or mixed. You have the Black Mine Workers Union staging a very successful strike the other day, being duly met by the Chamber of Mines in negotiations, getting an equitable result. And this is the sort of thing that is happening and is just not being reported to the Canadian people.
In other words, you've got the same economic problems in a way as we have in Western Canada, but because we don't have the political embarrassments, we don't lead to violence, whereas you do. Because the black man doesn't have a vote.
Well, the black man in India has a vote, but look what has just been happening in India.
That's a different kettle of wax altogether, though.
But it isn't. Because you have the same ethnic problems in India that you have in South Africa.
In other words, in India, you have religious and racial division and bitter hatred, and you have that in Africa too.
Exactly right.
All right, but between whom does this exist? The white man, the coloured man, the Indian, and the black man. You've got 4 groups of bitter people.
And also between various factions of that. I mean, the Indians are divided into the Hindus and the Muslims. The blacks have got 9 major language groups, 260 different dialects, some that are very worried and very concerned historically about others. It's not easy to make a constitution to put all that together.
But the white man is the master. The white man has the guns, the power, the control, and he will maintain his position by force if necessary.
No, I don't agree.
Oh.
But I do agree that you're going to have to find a constitution which satisfies the legitimate aspirations of all those people and try and put it together in some just way.
But the white man still has the guns, the power, the might, and is able, if necessary, in the final analysis for a civil war, to run and rule the country.
Well, that is the factual situation which exists, sure.
Now, what am I going to ask you next? I mean, it's the old media business. You are a propagandist for the white regime.
I'm not a propagandist for the white regime. I represent the South African private sector, and many of my trustees, like the Roman Catholic Cardinal of Cape Town and the Chief Rabbi of Johannesburg and the Black General Secretary of one of the largest trade unions, are not by any stretch of the imagination apologists or sympathizers with apartheid. But they do believe that there has to be peaceful, evolutionary change, and that Canadians, among others, can help in that process. That if you simply get nothing but a diet of riots and terror and unpleasant things, it is very hard then for the Canadian government and for thinking Canadians to decide on a policy towards South Africa which actually helps us instead of hindering us.
But the prime requisite for the development of South Africa and the gradual civilization of the continent, of the subcontinent, is peace with order.
That's right, peace with order and justice.
Who was it used to use the phrase peace with order?
I don't know. But I'm sure he didn't use justice, whoever he was.
No, it was also strength through joy.
Yes. Well, that wasn't I haven't got anything to do with that fellow. And my father fought against him. I was a little too young to do that.
You're an Anglo-African. No, you're an Anglo-South African.
Yes.
You don't even have a political party to represent you now.
Pretty much. There's a party called the Progressive Federal Party, which is not a very substantial force in the legislature.
Back to the voting for a minute. The blacks have no votes. They have some kind of consultation representation.
Yes.
The coloureds and the Indians, do they sit equally with votes in the various state houses or only in the federal parliament?
At the moment, what the new constitution is that there are 3 houses. Each of the major houses deals with the affairs of each community. In other words, the kind of education that, say, the Asian community will have is not necessarily the same kind of education that the coloureds or the whites would want. But they meet together in all the big committees, just as they do in Ottawa: defence, finance, foreign policy, and so on.
But they don't have one man, one vote for the coloureds.
Oh, yeah,
sure. They do?
Yeah.
In the same houses?
As I say, the 3 communal houses.
But the blacks don't have a vote at all?
Not yet.
Is it possible within the next 100 years to give the black a vote, or would that mean the end of white supremacy?
Well, I think it's inevitable that they will get the vote.
It must be embarrassing, though, to the government when Desmond Tutu wins a Nobel Peace Prize for being an opponent of the South African white government.
Well, they didn't show any great jubilation about it, but quite frankly, I was delighted. I think he deserves it. His influence has been thrown on the side of peace and peaceful change, and that's what I stand for. He also wants to get away from apartheid, and that's what we stand for.
Give me a quick, the South Africa Foundation.
Yes.
And not tomorrow.
Oh, yes, to get away from apartheid tomorrow, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Now.
Now. One man, one vote.
Well, that's not getting away from apartheid. That's a constitutional structure.
Okay. Give me a quick thumbnail sketch of your enemies on your borders, because as I recall the last time, Zimbabwe was great trouble to you, was it not?
Well, you know, one of the things, again, that is not being reported is that because partly of Canadian intervention in diplomacy, you know, the Canadians are helping to mediate the Namibian dispute. Because of the role the Americans have played, the tensions between South Africa and her neighbors are being diffused. And in fact, there is now a pact between South Africa and the Marxist-Leninist state of Mozambique. There's a disengagement agreement between South Africa and the Marxist-Leninist state of Angola. And you are getting, in both cases, joint military patrols of South African and Angolan and Mozambican government troops to see that there is no breakup of that peaceful settlement.
Quickly, Marxist-Leninist Mozambique, Marxist-Leninist Angola.
Yes.
Certainly no democracy in Zimbabwe. Is that also Marxist-Leninist?
Well, there is a democracy in Zimbabwe, but unfortunately Mugabe said he wants a one-party state, and the next time he wins an election, he'll use that as a mandate.
Is Namibia the old German West Africa?
Yes.
And how's that now?
That at the moment is still, we're still ruling it.
Against the wishes of the United Nations?
That's right.
And that you're going to stay at?
Well, we want to get out. I mean, there's no particular reason for us to maintain that. I mean, it costs us money. It probably costs us something in the order of $2 billion a year.
I haven't seen any incidents lately where you were behaving like the Israelis, you know. The moment there's a slight outbreak, hammer them. You're not doing that nowadays.
No. I mean, in fact, partly because, as I say, of the Canadian diplomacy, and you know, let's give credit. It's not an easy thing for people to understand.
Has Canada done something?
Yes, Canada's done something.
Ooh. Joe Clark, the new External Affairs Minister.
Well, it was also done under the Trudeau government.
Oh yes, one never gives these fellows a proper credit, does one? Anyway, I can sit and giggle about it. It's not very funny to you. You got one segment of a bash at John H. Chettle of the South Africa Foundation, especially if you're a South African new or used, after the break. Well, lots of callers want to have at you. They may all want to praise you and think that I was a rude, unreasonable person, which is highly unlikely. Go ahead to John Chettle of the South Africa Foundation.
Yes, Mr. Chettle, why don't you mention Chief Buthelezi and his politic of non-violence? A lot of people do believe that the chief is the only moderate black leader who can help prevent a Holocaust in South Africa. I have met the chief myself several times and listened to his speeches in Ulundi, and I really believe that he is a good man. Okay, ma'am. John.
Well, I agree with you entirely. I agree with your caller. I think, in fact, that Chief Buthelezi, if he were more of a chic figure, might have been a candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize.
He's got no charisma.
Well, he in fact has got a great deal of charisma, but he doesn't take quite so chic a line. For example, he's totally against...
chic, C-H-I-C.
C-H-I-C.
Oh, I was thinking of a chic. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Jack, this man indicated earlier on that he was not a propagandist. Hello?
That's correct. Turn down your television.
Propagandist for South Africa.
Right.
I tend to disagree with him. People in South Africa that you see, one of the basic reasons for promotion and getting official positions in South Africa is if you do not go against the system. This particular individual mentioned the Progressive Federal Party. Within the ranks of South African peoples, they are recognized or tainted as a communist party. Right. Now, this particular leader, Botha, and the rest of them, have the same Reagan mentality. they see communism around every corner.
Okay, hold on to that one.
Well, that's just nonsense. Anybody who says the Progressive Federal Party is communist or anything like that is just talking through his hat.
And what about the party that leads towards Reagan?
Well, the Botha Party is concerned, obviously, about the role of the Soviet Union in Africa. After all, we've got 2 communist states on our borders. We've got 26,000 Cuban troops in Angola. It's something that is going to concern anybody, would concern Canadians.
26,000?
Yeah.
Well, what does the caller make of that? Is this communist fear real or just imagined? That's you.
Hello, me?
No, I'll have to carry on. Not very bright, that South African. Go ahead from Seattle, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chettle, I'm a black American calling from Seattle, Washington. And I know that in the United States and in the Western world, most of what we hear about South Africa is coming through our media, such as yourself being a propagandist for the South African government. My contention is that as far as one man, one vote, I look at South Africa now and it seems the way America was 40 or 50 years ago. And the resolution that South Africa may not be corrected in their mentality towards blacks to make up for another hundreds of years is totally unacceptable. And I'm sure the South African government sees it being unacceptable to them also any time in the future. How do you feel about the prospect, the real prospect of armed rebellion by the black Africans in your country?
Good question.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that I am very irritated when people carry on with this propaganda stuff. You know, if you don't like the message, don't necessarily attack the messenger. Try and deal with the message. Now, as far as the message is concerned, I think that there are a lot of dissatisfied black people, and they are very dissatisfied because of the discrimination which still persists. And I sympathize with that very much. But to think that there's going to be some massive uprising when you think that the South African military forces are the most formidable in the whole of Africa, that they can call on 480,000 trained reservists within 48 hours' notice, is simply unrealistic.
I suppose the message that you want to get across, in all fairness to you, is the fact that progress is being made.
Yes.
What's the biggest step towards what you might call the civilization of your society?
Well, I think the biggest step we have already taken, and that is that the government has actually acknowledged that discrimination on the grounds of race is wrong, that it's got to be done away with as fast as possible, and that we must construct a truly just society. Now, I think that they are laggard in doing just that, but they are certainly moving.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, 2 questions, if I may.
Yeah.
First one is, how accurate would your guest say that James Michener's book called The Covenant is? And following on that, is there any move to persuade the Dutch Reformed Church to retranslate the Old Testament in those parts where they say that they are following in order to run apartheid?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and I'm glad...
Could you explain it to me?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked it, because the Covenant deals with the growth of various societies in South Africa and various people through generations. And they deal with, among other things, the role that the church has played. Now, the interesting thing, your previous caller asked about the changes taking place within society and so on. The interesting thing is that the Dutch Reformed Church, the Cape Synod of the Dutch Reformed Church, for the first time in history, declared that apartheid was absolutely immoral. And I think that this is an indication of the kind of changes that are taking place. I mean, the things that give me as a South African great hope for the future.
Dutch Reformed Church says
the Dutch Reformed Church,
immoral?
Yes.
That's a big step.
A big step.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, well, number one, all this business that your guest keeps talking about change, well, as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of people within South Africa, that's like looking down the railroad tracks. You know, the rails look like they're coming together, but we know damn well that they never will. I contend that this gentleman would love to see change as long as it's not in his lifetime. One other thing is that I have heard that the leaders of the Dutch Reformed Church who have spoken up against apartheid have been, what's the word, vilified or discredited or attempted to be discredited by everyone else in the Dutch Reformed Church. And one other thing, I would like to know how your guest can justify the fact that these homelands are supposed to be some sort of autonomous states. I'd like to know how he figures.
Yes. I've got his question. What about the homelands? It's always they have freedom except for external affairs. Is that right?
They have total freedom. In fact, they are fully independent. People do not choose. Countries outside South Africa do not choose to recognize them, but they are fully independent. And in the case of Bophuthatswana, produce something like 50% of the world's platinum production, which may be worth mentioning because platinum is absolutely vital for oil refining. And literally 99% of the world's reserves are in South Africa. If there was a major confrontation, as some of your listeners appear to expect, then there would be a cut-off of that, and you would literally find the oil refineries of Alberta and Newfoundland and so on grinding to a halt.
You're telling me that the natural resources of South Africa are totally essential in that particular case to the continued progress and industry in the rest of the world?
Absolutely.
Now, a country what was that province called that you talked about, that independent country?
Oh, Bophuthatswana.
Bophuthatswana. You still control, South Africa still controls the external affairs of that?
No, it has its own foreign affairs minister.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, you were talking about a constitution being drawn up. Is this constitution being drawn up by the government in charge, this Le Parti?
There was a president's committee or president's council which consisted of various races but on which no blacks agreed to serve.
I see. Wouldn't it be in the best interest of the whole country in trying to do this of having maybe some impartial people sitting on this Constitution Committee, like maybe a Canadian or somebody from one of the United Nations?
Well, I think in most cases countries like to draw up their own constitutions themselves.
Oh, I should think so. I can't imagine any Brits or any Americans sitting in our convoluted constitution. John Chettle, second time you've been on the Webster program, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Nice to have you here. Come back in another 5 years. I'll still be here, and I'll probably still call you a propagandist, but in the nicest way.
Thank you very much.
My thanks to John Chettle of the South African Foundation. Next, the Lone Ranger. Take it away. Graham Lea. Let's take some cheap shots at Graham Lea this morning. He ran last, failed miserably in the NDP leadership convention, and thereupon he got into a snit, sits now as an independent, and he wants to start his own party. What do you got to say about that?
I didn't know it was a question.
Oh, yes, no, it's not a question.
I thought it was a statement of fact.
It was a statement to annoy you.
Oh, no, well, it doesn't annoy me, because I can quite imagine that there are people who think that I would be childish enough to do what I did out of a snit. If people have that opinion, I would hope that they change their mind, but there's not very much I can do about it.
Okay, and now you want to start a new party.
I would like to start another political force in this province.
What's a political force?
It's another
Is that a party?
It's another political party to form the government in this province.
What would be different about such a new party? People are either left-wing Socreds or right-wing NDPers or left-wing Liberals or right-wing Liberals, or what have you. I mean, what does this province need with a new party?
I don't think that most people in this country or in this province would consider themselves to be either right or left wing. I think most people in this province and in this country would consider themselves to be moderate people who belong somewhere in the middle.
Marjorie Nichols, a reporter of record in this province, says, in the Sun in this province says, who are Graham Lea's backers? He says his core group of 20 is composed of corporate managers, senior academics, professionals, and people prominent politically. And I'm not going to ask you to name them because you're not going to tell me. I mean, that's just silly. But I've forgotten the question.
Well, I'll give you the answer. I like that.
Just a minute. Oh, yes. There is a tendency, says Nichols, not known for her subtlety on occasions, that for your group to be dismissed as cooks. Do you want to dismiss yourself as a cook? I'm sorry, I mean...
I know.
You're an old friend of mine, you see, and I don't want to
see,
that's
the problem. It's almost better to go on with someone who's an enemy.
That's
you know, because then you get down to business.
They take you more seriously.
They take you more seriously.
That's right.
But...
and when I say you're an old friend, you're not an old intimate friend. You're merely a guy whom I've known for a long while and who has a very pleasant, engaging personality.
Well, Jack, as always, you're very accurate. If the people who are backing the idea of another political party in this province, an alternative political party, are kooks, then I would suggest that the majority of British Columbians would fall into that category.
Well, now I'll be serious. There is a wide gaping hole in the two political parties we have here. Most people are very untrustworthy of the NDP, and they think that Bennett has dug a hole somewhere, pulled himself in underneath it, and hidden in case something happens to him. There's a hell of a space for a new political party, but it's got to come on like a thunderbolt with 20 big names of credibility. That's the problem, isn't it?
Well,
I mean, we'd all like to get rid of Bennett now, I'm sure. All social creditors would like to dump Bennett if they saw a viable establishment alternative. I mean, who would want Bennett for free enterprise?
It's not so much that the social credit would like to dump Bennett.
No, I'm talking about the businessman in BC would like to dump Bennett.
I don't think there's any doubt about that, because the business community is very concerned about the hesitancy of investment in this province. If you sit down with them privately and talk with them, they will talk about not just Bennett. They will say that two things worry them. One is the attitude of a number of trade union leaders, not all, and the attitude of Bill Bennett. They could live with either one. It's the combination of the two.
That you bring me to my other point, the NDP, you know. They're a potential disaster here. You know that as well as I do. That's one of the reasons you left them.
Well, the NDP is precluded from coming up with economic policies that are meaningful because there is too much influence in the NDP of the trade union movement. And the trade union movement is probably the most conservative institution in Canada today.
Oh, except for some of the odd people like Cuby. He doesn't seem to know whether he's going backwards, forwards, upwards, or downwards. Will likely lose his job to my militant buddy on the left, Frank Kennedy, and boy, will that be a party. Bennett will get hysterical if Frank Kennedy gets Cuby's job. And then we'll have picketing and trouble with Expo and God knows what not, with the NDP saying nothing. Right?
Well, they're in a very precarious position.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, let's do something else. We know your policies. You're really a small L liberal NDP.
I would be, yeah, that's fair enough.
In fact, you really belong in the Liberal Party now.
No, not the way the Liberal Party is now.
If it were a good, clean Liberal Party, you belong in a good, clean Liberal Party.
And yes, but only if the Liberal Party were to change their policies to meet the realities of the 1980s. I'm afraid that the Liberal Party so far has not done that. And their policies are better suited to the rich resource economy of 15 years ago.
And I didn't even want to mention the economy this morning. It's disastrous in British Columbia. And nobody's doing anything.
Well, there are things that we could do.
All right, here's a guy, the Lone Ranger, Graham Lea, who wants to start a new political party. Do you want a new political party? What do you want in your new political party? And most of all, do you want him in your new political party? After the break. I'm not taking him first. Do you want to talk to Graham Lea? No, you're not already, but when you come on, give him a bad time, will you? Hold on, please. I didn't know that was on the air. Go ahead to Graham Lea, the Lone Ranger of BC politics. Where are you?
Hello, Graham?
Yes.
Yeah. Listen, there's something I wanted to ask you. Are you being sponsored by the Fraser Institute?
Cut them off. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Graham.
Good morning.
Yes, it's been a long time since you and I have spoken, as a matter of fact, but I wanted to raise, you made the statement that the unions you feel are quite conservative at this particular time, I trust.
Yes.
And that you feel that they are too influential within the NDP party, is that correct?
That's right.
because as a trade unionist myself, I've tempted to say that it has been a considerable debate, of course, and one which has been rampant within the Fed, that perhaps...
Get to the point, will you?
Perhaps it was the other way around, that the NDP was a little too influential within the labor movement. And this, of course, is causing great controversy, well, certainly between the Kennedy and the QB forces within the Federation. What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, let me deal with why I say that the trade union movement is conservative. I don't mean that they're necessarily philosophically conservative. I mean conservative in that they will not recognize that the world is changing and that they have to change or they'll be in a great deal of trouble. So it's a conservative notion based on the fact that they won't change.
Well, don't you, my second question would be this, then don't you feel, though, that there are some basic conditions or basic tenets of the old classic battle, which I know will bore Jack to death?
I've done already. Go away. Question. Are you in favor of Labour making concessions in their union agreements now to enable the wheels of the economy of British Columbia to start turning on a good non-union basis?
It's concessions where necessary, but not necessarily concessions. I don't think you can go right across the board. I think what I'm in favor of the business community, the labor community, and the government sitting down as they do in West Germany, as they do in Japan, and working together cooperatively, first of all, to identify the problems we're having.
I'll tell you the problems. Like, we can identify the problems right now. We've lost our world markets. Our union rates are still at the high of the peak. The businessmen say they can't get jobs unless they get some concessions in union rates. And Stone Age unionists like Roy Gautier, you know, not Neanderthal, just Stone Age, they will never give an inch, even on the feather bedding practices in the Building Trades Council. Who's going to hit somebody over the head?
Jack, if that was the extent of our problems, we'd be laughing. We have some very, very serious problems in this province. The forest industry is in crisis. If we continue at the rate of the annual allowable cut, we have at best 40 years of timber left. The fishing industry is in worse shape in terms of stock and too much capital chasing those few stock. And the mining industry is on its back. Now, those are structural problems. They are, you know, one of the exceptions I take is when we treat the problems we have now as if we were in an ordinary recession. We are not. If we were in an ordinary recession, we'd be laughing.
Well, we can't even get together to plan an economy.
Well,
can we?
We'd better.
But we can't. Go ahead, please. Who is this, by the way?
My name is Kentish Steele.
What?
Kentish Steele?
Are you a television star?
Hope to be sometime soon.
Oh, no, Steele, what's that television program?
No, I'm
it's not
candidate for Vancouver.
Oh, you're running for mayor?
Yes, I am.
Well, Kentish, are you going to join his party, or do you want to be the leader of it?
I probably will be the leader of that party. I admire Mr. Lee very much because I admire how he stood up to those clowns, the NDP at the convention. I really, really do. I want to lay one word in you, Mr. Lee. It's participative democracy. That's what I aim to push for the next 20 years in British Columbia.
You got a campaign for the mayor of Vancouver elsewhere. You'll be on this program briefly next week sometime. Can't put him on and give him extra time. He may upset Van der Zam and Harcourt. Go ahead, please.
Is that me?
That's you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, I'm a trade unionist, and I know the policies of the trade union movement, and they put forward many good suggestions how to put this province back to work, such as a shipbuilding, merchant marine, increasing the fish stocks, etc., etc., etc. You're surely aware of those policies. Why now have you turned on the trade union movement and making them your whipping boy?
I don't think I am doing that, but let me just take one of your suggestions, that the trade union put together a proposal to have a merchant marine fleet in Canada. That is not practical in today's reality. The fact of the matter is that if you were to put together a merchant marine fleet in Canada, in British Columbia, it would be trade union. And there is no way in the world that trade union rates can compete with the Pan-American registered bottoms who are paying starvation wages and poor living conditions to the people who work on those ships. Whether we like it or not, that's who we'd have to compete with, and we could not compete.
Why do we have to compete with them?
Well, if you don't compete, you're not going to survive. You'll go under.
Are you saying that the workers of BC have to become like the workers of Latin America and the other third world countries?
No, I'm not. I'm saying that if we were to put forward your idea of building a merchant marine fleet, that in order to survive, they would in fact have to become like the wages in third world countries. I like it. It's a nice romantic idea. It just practically won't fly.
Okay, dokie. Kamloops, go ahead to Graham Lea.
Yes, Mr. Lee, you were talking about a political force. You wanted to start another political party. Well, we need another political party in this province, like another hole in the head. What we do need is a different political force, because what happens is that the majority of people vote for parties and not for the best individual for the job. I would like to get your thoughts on setting a political force up as far as getting rid of all our NDPers, social credit, and the rest of them, and just having people run as independents so that you can vote for the best man for the best party.
Okay, first of all, you say that we need another political party like we need another hole in the head. I personally don't think that British Columbians have that first hole in their head. So it's not a case of another hole in their head. I believe that people in British Columbia want to cooperate. Look at what we do. What does a football team do? A football team competes with other football teams. But in order to compete, the players on that football team cooperate with one another to compete with another team. If British Columbia is to be considered a team, then we have to cooperate with one another to meet the competitive countries that we're dealing with, that we have to deal with other economies that we have to compete with.
Why do we have our politicians then are not necessarily the best men that are available for the job? The only reason that they get elected is because there's social credit, and they want to kick the NDP out, or their NDP, and they want to kick the social credit out.
You're correct. I think that most people in British Columbia, half of them go down and they hold their nose and they vote for the NDP.
Yeah, but how many people vote every election? Only half of the people in the province, and why?
No, we have a good voter.
Decent running.
No, we have a good voter turnout. We run about 70% of voter turnout in this province.
Correct.
The other half go down and they vote for social credit and hold their nose. So in fact, what they're doing is voting against. I think it's time in this province that we had a political party that we as British Columbians could go out and vote for.
Have you got a name for it?
No, not at this point.
Another segment with Graham Lea, the Lone Ranger, after the break. By the way, Graham, just tell me what your constituency association in Prince Rupert has said about your defection. Very unhappy.
They've asked for my resignation.
Oh, so they'll run against you in the next election?
Of course.
That'll be tough.
It will be tough, but I think that I can give them a good run for their money.
Do you get snubbed in the streets?
No, not at all.
I just wondered, always looking for a wee item, like some old lady had bopped you in the head with a handbag. Nothing that I can tell Denny Boyd about?
No.
Because Denny Boyd occasionally writes columns other than obituaries. Occasionally. Not very often. He's an expert on that, though. Go ahead, please, from Nanny Mo.
Two questions. Mr. Lee?
Yes?
Is there any room for the initiative referendum system in British Columbia like it's used in Washington State or the United States? And question number two, I'd like to help you out in your third force or your centralist party in British Columbia. And I'm from the Nanaimo. How do I get a hold of you? And I'll hang up and listen to your answer, okay?
Well, you can either write me at the Parliament Buildings or phone me at the Parliament Buildings at 387-6065. Referendums. I'm not in favor of referendums to decide public policy. I find that people want referendums when they're sure that they're going to win. Like the people who are for capital punishment want a referendum on it. The people who are for a nuclear-free zone in Canada want a referendum on it. But those people, for instance, who are against capital punishment, they don't want a referendum on it. That isn't our form of government. We have a representative democracy where we elect people to make those decisions for us. If we don't like the decisions, we throw them out at the next election.
They must vote according to their conscience.
That's right, according to their conscience, and that's a very misunderstood concept. That legislators have the duty to vote according to their own conscience. There's no way that you can take a referendum in your own constituency every time there's an issue and then vote with the majority. You can't establish it. So you are required to vote your own conscience, and then people can get rid of you or re-elect you.
Except if you say in the hustings, and not in this case, I'm in favor of capital punishment and then vote against it, you're a fink.
You're a fink then. Unless you change your mind, and that's possible.
Yeah,
you know,
especially with me.
Well, you know, one of the things that's wrong in our society, that it is seen as a strength never to change your mind, and it's seen as a weakness to change your mind when presented with new facts. And if we're going to deal with the problems we have, we're going to have to change those values so we can deal with some sort of reality.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. This is a strange morning. First of all, we have that colonial from South Africa. Now we're having this northern MLA, and I'm just wondering, how does he manage being an MLA from Prince Rupert that the NDP supporters put in? How does he manage this? Who pays him now?
You pay him. You pay him.
I don't understand why he can be an MLA from Prince Rupert under the new party, whatever that is, that invisible name he called himself.
Well, first of all,
How can he represent that area?
I had over 7,000 votes, and the NDP has 200 members in their party in the constituency. So obviously there were about 6,800 people who voted for me who are not members of the NDP.
I didn't say membership, I said supporters.
Okay. And obviously there were a number of people who voted for me because I represented the NDP. But there were also a great number of supporters who voted for me because they felt that I had done a good job over the years and wanted me to continue.
But the answer to the question is that because you change your party label does not mean that you must resign.
No, not at all. And I follow a number of people who I think are very honorable, like Scott Wallace and others, who have done the same thing that I have done and taken the course of action that I've taken.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Oh, by the way, just a minute, do you get extra staff and extra money because you're a one-man party?
No, the Constitution of British Columbia says that every MLA gets exactly the same resources.
Except for the leader of the opposition.
Yes, that's right. There's a special clause in the Constitution.
But you got a better office or something?
Well, I have an office with a better view.
Oh, I see. Go ahead. Where will you sit in the House? You'll sit...
Between. Betwixt and between.
Betwixt and between. On the opposition side, though?
On the opposition side.
Oh, yes, they've got so many social creditors now.
That they overflow onto the opposition
side. So you'll be betwixt and between. You'll be the rose between the thorns.
So true.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
Is that me?
Yeah, it's you.
Okay. First of all, I would like to tell Mr. Lee that I think he's absolutely right, that there definitely is a desperate need for a middle-of-the-road party, not only here but everywhere, but we'll stick to here right now. And I've been wanting to make this comment for some time. I have no short-term solutions, but there is one long-term solution to almost all our problems that's ignored completely. Let's start teaching civics from kindergarten on up. The basic problem is human greed. And until we teach civics in our schools, we'll never get any improvement.
If civics includes starting to teach students at a very early age economics, I'm in complete agreement with you. We ask voters in this country and in this province to vote according to economic platforms put forward by different political parties. No one ever said that democracy would work if you have an uninformed mass. And it's very important that we, in our school system, train people in civics and in economics so that we can have intelligent, well-informed voters.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
I'd like to point out when the Japanese were visiting Canada, they pointed out why they wouldn't invest in this country. First, there's too much government interference, too high a taxation, too low a productivity, and too much labor unrest. Cure those, and we're on our way.
Okay, let's cure them one at a time, Marvin.
Hello.
Yeah, just a minute. Let's cure them one at a time. Too much government interference. What would you do as dictator? What are you?
Oh.
Give me your answers to your own questions.
Well, the first thing is we have too many civil servants sitting around doing nothing. I'm trying to get a house built, and they're telling me all the reasons why I can't do it.
Okay, so end all regulations about house building. That's the first thing.
Come off it. Use it with some degree of intelligence and latitude.
All right, next point.
I just finished reading a study on the history since the Second World War of the West German and the Japanese economic societies. When you do study those and take a look and compare them, you'll find out that there are very few similarities in the structure of those two economies, yet both have been successful. And the one commonality that they both have, though, is that they work cooperatively together, business, government, and labor, in order to get their economy going, and that way they can do some long-range planning.
You're talking about the Japanese?
Yes.
Well, they've demonstrated in the previous regimes how they're willing to take orders and bow to the master, bow to the master, bow to the master.
Okay, I'm not... Look,
the Germans the same.
No.
You'll never get free-thinking, free-standing Canadians to go for that kind of stuff.
I don't believe that.
We'd rather be poor and
we cannot set up identical programs to either Japan or to West Germany, but we do have to base our economic planning on cooperation.
Yeah, I agree. Now, another question, Melvin. How are you going to increase union productivity?
We have more holidays than any other society in the Western world. And when you add in all these funny holidays they get from Quebec that the federal government takes, now you get some idea of why we have low productivity and shortest hours.
Merv, you know perfectly well what the trouble is. There's too much democracy in this country. Isn't that right?
That could be.
Thank you. I know, Mervyn. Listen.
Where is he from? That way or this way?
That way. Thanks for coming. We had to have the Lone Ranger on this morning. If you want to support the Lone Ranger, call him 387-6065 or write them at the Parliament buildings in Victoria. You haven't even got a trust fund set up for your new political party.
Yes, we have.
You have?
Yes.
Send small...
I'll buy you lunch out of it.
No, that's graft.
That's bribes.
That's bribery. No.
I thought maybe you were susceptible.
No, not this way.
Okay.
No, I'm doing all right. I can manage my own Pritikin diet.
Well, you can buy me lunch.
I'm very big in garbanzo beans. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.
A little different from the usual routine interview, I think you'll agree. Next, TAFQs. And if you don't know what that means, stay tuned and find out what TAFQ means after the break.
Want the one, right? Rose. We'll have the other two standing by if you feel like going to them. Go ahead.
I'll do one. I'll do 2 and 3 as 1 and 2.
Okay.
If I call for it. I need the monitor. Good news for the Musqueam Indian Band. Kind of bad news, not too bad, for the wealthy golfers at the lush Shaughnessy Golf Club on Indian lands. The Supreme Court of Canada is going to order the government, not the golfers, to pay $10 million to the Musqueam Band for the breach of trust by government officials in the way they signed a lease with the Indians, that's between the government and the Indians, in 1958. The story is that in 58, a 75-year deal was signed at certain rates of money, which the Indian Band was to get for the lease of their land. In fact, if I recall correctly, the Indian affairs people who made the deal conned the Indians in, not by fraud or anything, but just by a really lack of proper looking after the interests of the Indians, into surrendering the land and giving the golf club a 75-year lease with fixed terms of increases over every so many years. The federal court, Mr. Justice Frank Collier, first of all gave a decision in favor of the Indians as against the Indian Affairs Department. And then the Federal Court of Appeal turned it down, and this morning the Supreme Court of Canada upheld the trial judge's judgment, by which means the Musqueam Indians will get $10 million. Now, at the moment, Shaughnessy pays about $33,000 a year, Shaughnessy Golf Club. And you remember, they had a most unfortunate business when their clubhouse burned down. And it was rebuilt and is now again a beautiful clubhouse. But under this settlement, when the renewals come up, it will be on a different basis. And if the Indians and the golf club can't agree on terms, it will go to arbitration. So I would say a few years down the road, probably starting in 1988, the dues will go up very sharply for the golfers at Shaughnessy Golf Club. So Shaughnessy Golf Club isn't too bad because they don't have to pay the $10 million, but their dues will probably go up over the years as the rental of the lands will increase. Now I have a very serious TAFQ. That is a fair question, put it up. How can a judge ban the name of a man accused of buggery and gross indecency? And before I give you that answer, to expand on the question, if you are charged with an offense in adult court, no matter who you are or what you are, that name must and always is public. There is no way that a Mr. X can appear in court here protected from the publicity of the charge. Conceivably, that might be unfair if a man is later acquitted of the charge. But this publication of the names of people charged with crimes is one of the cornerstones of our justice system. We must know who is charged, and nobody can tell us that we must protect the name of the person charged in any normal circumstances whatsoever. This actually happened last week in a court in Nelson, where in court, I must say this, at the request of a defense counsel who said that the reporting or broadcasting of the name of the accused would identify the complainant. In other words, it would be easy if you knew the name of the accused to identify the complainant. And the judge did give an order, and it was to be marked on the files that the name of the accused was not to be given out or broadcast on the air or reported in the newspapers. That, of course, caused quite a stir there. Now, what happened? Later in the week, the judge called the people back into court again and lifted his own ban. Now, obviously, there was great concern about why it had been banned in the first place. I spoke to Chief Judge Gerald Coltis, the Chief Provincial Judge, and he told me, I don't think there was any legal power to make that order to ban the name, except that it appears to have been made by the judge, that was Stuart Enderton, to protect the victim. But it had no legal basis. The judge, Enderton, realized that a little later and took steps to lift his ban. This is the kind of thing which we must watch for. The man who was charged was a lawyer in Nelson whose name is, goodness gracious me, I've forgotten, Walter Cadikin. And I don't use that name out of any joy or any pleasure or anything else, but I use that name just to make you understand why it's so important for the media to be on the alert so that nobody can be protected from publicity, or the public must not be prevented from knowing who is up on a charge in our legal system. If, of course, it's a juvenile, the juvenile cannot be identified in any way, shape, or form at certain stages in the trial. However, that was a fair question which I actually asked myself so I could answer it on the air, because when we heard about this ban on the publication of the accused lawyer's name, we were concerned about it and made our own inquiries forthwith. How much to go in this segment? Time for a quick TAFQ. Next one. We are a group of exasperated seniors. Why does our provincial government steal every increase we get by raising our rents? Talking about long-term care, I think, Annie, is that right? That was Annie. The facts are that residents of long-term care facilities are quite correct in their complaint. Every time the federal government raises the pensions, the provincial government takes it away from these people. The old age pension went up in July, $25. The rent on the seniors' manors accommodation went up in October, $23.25. The federal said the increase was to give the seniors a little better standard of living, and Monique Bejan, who was still around, wanted it passed on to the pensioners. It was not meant to increase provincial coffers. But you know social credit in Victoria. And the provincial ministry says the rents will continue to go up every 6 months because the raises are indexed to the old age pension and the guaranteed income supplement payment. Are you sure on that? Sure. I've just been corrected by one of my reporters. The name of the lawyer charged is Ronald Cadigan, not Walter Cadigan. Take a break.
Slide positive. I thought it started out one of the more bizarre of interviews I've ever seen you so explicitly say that people don't want Bennett anymore.
Yeah. Can understand. We're so stupid in this program, not me, the other people. Because one of the things I enjoy doing most of all are free-for-alls, you know. And they sometimes book in these damn dull authors and silly people, and you have routine pro forma interviews, which is why I kind of got a little bit giddy with Graham Lea this morning. I get so fed up with asking predictable answers and predictable questions and getting predictable answers. But it ain't all that easy to fill 90 minutes a day. It's not just sitting here and talking, you know, for 90 minutes. And it's difficult to sit and talk for 90 minutes, especially if you've got a guest who's a bit of a doughhead. You know, duh. It's very difficult. Not that my guests this morning were both fine. In fact, the South African was getting irritated at being called a propagandist. And Lee used to be a broadcaster way back in the dim and distant past. Broadcaster! Don't correct me from the sidelines here. If anybody on this crew wants to do the program, they can sit in here and take the heat. I've checked the smart aleck remarks from my staff on the side. What are we doing this morning? Free for all. And I hope you've picked a decent call for the first one. You're in trouble, too. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
I just wanted to touch on that subject about banning somebody's name.
Yes, good idea.
Well, my last name just happens to be Olsen.
Well, oh, I see what you mean, Olsen. Oh, my goodness gracious me, what a cross to carry in life.
Well, not really. It might seem kind of petty even to say anything about it, but putting in job applications or almost anything, it always seems to come up, you know.
Yeah, that's a very sensitive point because, you know, it's, everybody, when they see the same Olsen, think, oh, that horror.
Yeah.
Don't they?
Seems to come to mind, you know, with the...
You've got a different first name.
Yeah, I do, but my brother happens to have the same first name, though.
Oh, poor brother.
Yeah, well...
And it raises the point, thanks very much, but the guy who's charged up in Nelson has a name the likes of which I'd never heard before, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just a charge by itself. I know nothing about the circumstances, and that matter will be dealt with by the courts. But now it will be dealt with the guy's name being known, which is the way it must be. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
By the way, how old are you?
Pardon?
How old are you?
22.
Are you working?
No, I'm not.
How long have you been unemployed?
Currently about a month and a half.
What do you do for a living when you're working?
I'm an electronics technician.
Okay, now carry on with your call.
Well, you made a comment that this ban or identification of people charged with crimes is the cornerstone of our legal system.
Yeah.
And it might be the cornerstone of the media. I mean, this publication before conviction and conviction in the press sells a lot of papers, I'm sure, but as soon as the guy's acquitted, you guys, well, that's page 13. It doesn't seem to matter anymore.
You've hit it right on the Achilles heel. You've kicked the Achilles heel very severely, but I didn't mean the cornerstone of the justice system. It's a cornerstone of the freedom we have to know what's happening in our justice system. And we must have it, even if people do suffer by it. We must know who is charged.
Yeah, what about the person who suffers? I mean, have you ever been hauled in for one of those lineups?
Nope.
Well, what happens is you get lined up with a bunch of guys who don't look anything like you. And if you just happen to maybe at the outside look like a rapist, the girl picks you, off you go to court, and your name's published in the paper. And it's myself right now, if I was innocent, if I could prove I was with the Chief Justice of British Columbia, they would accuse me, put my name in the paper, what chance would I have of getting employment again?
That's a price you pay for it, I'm afraid, and there are many
It's the
cases.
price we pay for the media to have the
It's
freedom
not-
to do that.
How would you like, I can tell you cases, a specific case in the past in Vancouver where a very important person was shuffled into a court late in the afternoon with a name incomplete on the charge sheet, and it was a very serious offence, and we exposed it at the time because of the fact that the bigger the name, the bigger the print. And people in public life must not become involved in these things. No, I concede your point, and a guy can be maliciously charged perhaps, or not enough evidence, and he can be acquitted, and when he's charged he's on page 1, and when he's acquitted he's on page 94. But that doesn't override the point that the public must know what's happening in the courts, or you have star chambers.
Why couldn't you wait until the person's convicted? I mean, it's still equal news. You could still publish that a person was charged, and later when the convictions come down, not convict people like Clifford Robert Olson. Well, I totally was abhorred by the man and thought he was disgusting. He was convicted in the press. There was no freedom there. There was no, the man should have been, a lot of things done to him.
Nonsense.
Not convicted in the press.
He was not convicted in the press, also.
You guys had him booked. He was, a dead man. If he had been totally innocent, somebody killed the guy, and you know that.
I don't accept that at all on the Olson case.
Maybe he did it, but the press picked up on it, and that was it. It was, there's no such thing as guilty or innocent before. It's guilty when charged.
The only thing
in Canada, you're guilty according to the press.
All right, I'll grant you a little step in that. The only thing which should be published when a man is charged with an offence is the man's name and the details of the offence. What has happened in the media in Canada, which is becoming more like the American media, and here I agree with you, is that the man is convicted in the initial story. That shouldn't happen. And if that happens and the media do that too often, it's up to the courts to stop it. And they can stop it, and they have the power to stop it. I'll agree there is an injustice in that, where a man is later acquitted and doesn't get equal prominence. But I will not agree that we could run a system whereby we keep the name secret until convicted.
Well, can we cite a case of, like, Bob Carter, where he was found?
I'm not even going to talk about that case now. I don't care what anybody else does in the media. The only, and I'm not going to discuss it. You're guilty of the offence now. What next? It was a good call, that guy. He was on his feet and on his toes. Prince Georgie. Good morning, Prince.
Yes, I'd just like to say you're doing a pretty good job.
Thank you very much. Turn down your television set and we'll have a wee blather. Turn down your set. Now, how old are you? She won't turn down her set, will she? Have you turned down your set yet? Magnets. Such a nice woman, too. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster, currently in the media, they have shown a lot of pictures of the starvation in Africa. And just a little over a week ago, the Canada Customs seized several thousand pounds of cheese. I'm wondering if that's to stand for either the starving in Africa or elsewhere for that matter, or is customs and parliamentarians going to just destroy the cheese on the dump somewhere? Are they going to donate it for the needy people?
Where was this? Where did this happen?
In eastern Canada.
Well, I will see if we can find a clipping on it, but I doubt if we'll be able to track that down after the break. Dawson Creek. How's the weather in Dawson Creek this morning?
It's about 30 below zero.
I'm glad you've got it, not me.
Pardon?
I'm glad you've got it. What's on your mind?
Mr. Caravetta, you were talking to Mr. Caravetta earlier in the week, the Social Credit candidate from Vancouver East, and he said 26,000 jobs have been created by Northeast Coal.
Yeah.
Well, did you know that Dawson Creek built a $3 million industrial park that does not have one tenant? And we already had an industrial park that was nearly empty, but they figured that wouldn't be enough, so they built another industrial park, and it's got paved roads and lighting, and there's never been a sod turn there.
That's in Dawson Creek.
Pardon?
It's complete, is it?
Yeah, Dawson Creek built the industrial park because we're only 50 miles away. We figured there was going to be all kinds of industry come in here.
Who built it? Was it the taxpayers builder, or is it an entrepreneur?
No, it was the city. I think we have a $300,000 payment due next year to the provincial government, and we have no income coming in from it.
I suspect that what Mario kind of...
not too good a situation. It'd make a good go-kart track. The road sort of winds around, you know. It's our local go-kart track.
And this is in a
pretty
new...
bad situation.
A new but
There sure wasn't
deserted...
any 26,000 jobs created, and
No.
I don't think it helped business all that much around here.
No.
There was some... We did get some spin-off, but in some ways I think it hurt more than it helped.
I believe I corrected them to a figure of 5,000 jobs.
Yeah.
5,000 is about right. Well, what Mario Caravetti knows about the economy of BC is in detail you can put in the back of a dime.
Say that again?
What Mario doesn't know a hell of a lot about politics in BC.
No, I got that impression. I tried to get through earlier in the week, but you get so many calls, it's pretty difficult to get through.
Well, he's obviously a good, useful candidate to run there because so many people hate Bob Williams, you see.
Yeah, that's true.
And Mario's a good, nice, friendly guy with a nice, round, bright, bald face, you know.
I wouldn't mind seeing Art Lee in there. I think we could use one member from another party in the legislature.
I think he'd be useless.
I think he'd do quite well.
He was the most, quote, attractive of the three people on the program. You know,
I think he's a good man. I think he was
probably a good man, but one liberal.
Liberal, but I think he was a pretty good MP when he was an MP. I
can't remember.
Followed it a bit.
Well, much obliged, and give my regards to the empty industrial park in Dawson Creek, and I'll tell Mario about it if he ever calls.
There's not one tenant at all. And I don't think there's any hope of any right now.
Much obliged. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello?
That's you. Yes, good morning.
Yeah, I'm just calling to see if there's any way. I really enjoy your show. It's very, very good. It's very informative, and I would like to know if you could get Mr. Bill Bennett on your show.
No, he's down a hole somewhere.
Okay.
He's down a mine somewhere.
Oh, well, if you can get him on your show, just to see if you can get him to explain to us why he's messing up so bad.
They offer us all kinds of cabinet ministers with nothing to say, but you can't get near the boss.
Okay, and I would like very much
but he has an open
scratch and win program that tickets that are out by Western Canada Lottery. I'm told that there's not very much winning going on in that, just a lot of selling.
Well, anybody who buys tickets is a mug anyway.
Oh, well, anyways.
No, I'm not interested in lotteries. I disapprove of them from a moral, ethical, and public interest standpoint. Did you get my tickets this week? No. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to know who these people are in Calgary that bailed out the Bank of BC. This
Ormskirk Investments.
Yes, who are the principals? Are they buddies with Edward Kaiser Jr.?
I asked Mr. Kaiser who they were, and he wouldn't or couldn't tell me, as I recall. Marjorie Nichols writes a good piece saying it's a shelf company which has been inactive for some time. I think that's one of the questions we might find out at the shareholders' meeting when I hope to go and ask my own question. I want to ask, for instance, how much severance pay, what was the contractual severance pay for the two top boys, McGeechan and Pilley, when they left the bank? I'd like to know exactly how much money was paid out. Just sheer nosiness, you know, just to cause trouble.
Yeah, you should do a program on that.
Now, well, you have no point in doing a program. Somebody's going to have to go to the meeting and ask the questions.
Yeah.
Because if they don't want to tell you on the air, they don't tell you. See, now, if you would pass an act to Parliament to give me the power of oath and imprisonment if they failed to answer questions properly, it would be easier to get the questions answered. But I get your point, and I should keep my eye on that situation. Good morning.
Good morning, Jack. Yeah, I work for a major distribution trucking company in the Lower Mainland. We recently acquired a major grocery contract.
Yep.
And a lot of people were displaced. A lot of people had to change their jobs. They were given options.
You're talking about Johnson?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They were given options whether they would take their severance pay or whether they would work for Johnson Terminals.
Right.
These guys took a real kicking in benefits and in wages and many other ways, just in all the whole ball of wax that goes with relocation. And I'd like to say that they seem to be a very cooperative bunch of boys, and I'd like to reaffirm the point that people are willing to cooperate with unions, with management, even with the government if they have to.
Was that where they had to change their union and go into the Teamsters?
Yes, sir.
And the transfer has gone fairly smoothly?
Yes, it has.
Even though there's a difference in benefits and some of them got to move their houses?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's good to know. Are you one of the transferred employees?
No, I'm not. I've been a Johnson employee for a while. I'm one of the boys that was displaced when they did the same thing to Woodward's.
Yes, and is Johnson not also the place where the Teamsters in some operation took a cut of $2 an hour and accepted shares for the future?
Yeah, I was one of those too.
Is that going to work out all right?
Well, I don't know. It depends on who you talk to. Some of the employees figure that money is written off the moment we agree to that, and others still maintain, well, we're protected. We have to get the money sooner or later.
I think you are protected and have to get the money sooner or later. I remember I had the business agent on at the time, and I think we had somebody from Johnson's too. I can't remember. But anyway, thanks for a positive, encouraging word this morning, sir. I'm much obliged. Go ahead from Victoria.
Yes.
Good morning. That's you, Victoria.
Yes, I want to talk to Jack Webster.
I'm speaking.
You know Jack Webster?
I'm so.
Oh, watching him on television now. The reason why I'm calling is I was listening to that program around...
You're Glaikit.
Beg pardon?
You're Glaikit.
You're Glaikit.
Well, you're talking to Webster. Now carry on.
Yes.
Are you happy now you're talking to Webster?
Okay, Jack.
All right. Now turn down your television set. It's driving you crazy.
I tried to reach you earlier on.
Well, how's Aberdeen?
When Lee was on.
Aye.
And I have started a party, a political party.
Aye.
And I tried to reach you before to get on your show.
Aye.
The party is a Canadian Coalition Party.
Aye.
Not the Citizens Coalition.
Who are you to start a party?
Well, I was with the PCs.
Nobody knows you.
I know that. But I was with the PCs.
And you're from Aberdeen?
I'm from Nanaimo.
You're from Aberdeen?
Beg pardon?
You're from Aberdeen?
Well, I was under Scott Wallace.
You come from Aberdeen, I'm saying?
No, I come from Dundee.
Oh.
And,
you're talking, you're havering. You're talking a lot of nonsense.
Oh, no.
You're just blathering away there.
Oh, no, I have a good platform, and I have tried to reach people with
Well,
it.
if I were you, I'd take your platform and I'd break it up into kindling wood.
Beg pardon?
Break it up for firewood, your platform.
No, don't be like that.
Write me a letter. I promise to answer it. Word of honor. If you write me a letter, I've just been pulling your leg. I'm sorry for my attitude. Write me a letter. Mark it for the personal attention of Mark Schneider, and he'll read it. And I'll be back after the break.
Okay.
We've got a shocker on capital punishment for you tomorrow morning with the prison doctor. And we're going to talk to Paul Lynn about the prospects of some real trade with China. Should happen one day. And we'll have a free-for-all too at 9 a.m. precisely. The Lone Ranger of BC Politics on Check at Midnight. The Horror of Hanging on Webster at 9 a.m. precisely.